What if your fate was sealed before you were even born? What if every success, failure, or choice you make is already decided, and nothing you do can change it? This was the reality John Calvin taught, and it still influences how people think about destiny today. John Calvin, born in 1509 in Noyon, France, grew up during a time of intense religious upheaval. The Catholic Church faced criticism for corruption, indulgences, and hierarchical control, and new ideas from Martin Luther and other reformers were spreading across Europe. Calvin trained in law and humanist scholarship before turning to theology, seeking a more disciplined, scripture-centered faith. As he developed his theological ideas, Calvin was influenced by humanist principles, the study of original biblical texts, and the growing Protestant emphasis on personal faith over church authority. He eventually settled in Geneva, Switzerland, where he aimed to create a society fully aligned with biblical principles, with strict moral codes and civic discipline. At the heart of Calvin's teaching is predestination. Living amid religious turmoil, Calvin sought to clarify how salvation worked in a world where church authority and rituals were increasingly questioned. He argued that God, in his infinite wisdom, had already chosen who would be saved, the elect, and who would be damned. Human actions, wealth, or moral behavior could not change this divine decision. Predestination wasn't intended as punishment or reward based on deeds, but as a theological response to uncertainty and anxiety about salvation in a corrupt world. Yet it created inner tension. If salvation was predetermined, how could anyone know if they were among the elect? People became deeply concerned with looking for signs of divine favor, scrutinizing their own lives for evidence of God's choice. This anxiety shaped daily behavior. Believers scrutinized their own success, moral choices, and social standing. Simple acts like charity, work discipline, personal frugality became ways to reassure themselves that they might be among the elect. Calvin emphasized that the elect would naturally display godly behavior, but the outward signs were often ambiguous. Even a good life wasn't proof. People constantly questioned themselves, wondering if their successes were real indicators or illusions of favor. Everyday life in Geneva reflected this. Theater, gambling, luxury, and frivolous entertainment were banned. People feared indulgence could mark them as unworthy, while hard work and public morality were expected as evidence of being chosen. Predestination also influenced career and vocational choices. Craftsmen, merchants, and farmers were encouraged to work diligently. Work itself became a spiritual act, not simply an economic necessity. The diligence of the elect was considered a visible sign of God's favor. Even children were taught this mindset. Schooling was rigorous, and moral discipline was strict. Success in academics or obedience to rules was framed as part of a larger spiritual proof, shaping behavior from a very young age. The psychological effect was constant anxiety. Every choice, every action, and every achievement became a test of worthiness. The more people tried to prove themselves, the more they doubted whether their signs of grace were genuine. Calvin did not intend to create fear. His goal was to honor God's absolute sovereignty and encourage moral behavior. Yet the unintended result was a culture obsessed with self-examination and spiritual accounting. Fast forward to modern times and you can see echoes of this anxiety. Career ambition, academic pressure, and social validation can feel like modern versions of Calvinist scrutiny. Checking social media likes or work performance mirrors the search for signs of divine favor. Consider the modern office. Employees push extra hours, constantly monitor productivity, and seek recognition. These behaviors parallel Calvin's notion of the elect displaying outward signs. The drive to succeed today can feel morally justified and spiritually anxious at the same time. In education, students chase degrees, certifications, and accolades. Every exam or award becomes evidence of worth, echoing the same need for reassurance that Calvin's followers felt regarding salvation. The pressure to prove oneself is a direct psychological parallel. Even wellness culture can mirror Calvinist thinking. Strict diets, fitness regimes, or moralized lifestyle choices operate as evidence of discipline or virtue. People track progress meticulously, striving to demonstrate control and worth, much like believers seeking signs of election. Max Weber later studied this phenomenon. He coined the term Protestant work ethic to describe how Calvinist theology unintentionally influenced the development of capitalism. Hard work, frugality, and discipline were not just spiritual acts. They became cultural norms that shaped economies. Calvin himself was not thinking about capitalism. His focus was spiritual salvation, not material accumulation. Weber observed that the anxiety-driven work ethic of the elect laid the groundwork for modern economic behavior, turning spiritual diligence into secular productivity. The connection between theology and modern life becomes clear. Anxiety about predestination fostered habits of work, planning, and self-monitoring. Today we chase promotions, reputation, and status for validation, creating a secular echo of Calvin's spiritual framework. Predestination also affected social hierarchies. Those considered morally upright or hardworking were treated as likely elect, earning respect and influence. Conversely, failure, indulgence, or laziness cast doubt on one's worth, creating pressure to conform to strict moral codes. You can see parallels in social media culture. Influencers display curated perfection, while audiences judge success, aesthetics, and lifestyle. The subtle anxiety to appear chosen or worthy mirrors the self-examination Calvin inspired in Geneva. Even government and civic behavior were influenced. Calvin's Geneva linked church and state, enforcing moral discipline through social structures. Citizens learned that public conduct reflected spiritual status, blurring the line between morality and societal approval. Predestination can be seen as a paradoxical motivation. People worked diligently, not knowing if it mattered, but still striving to demonstrate worth. Modern society mirrors this, striving for achievement despite uncertainty about ultimate meaning or reward. Artists and writers also reflected Calvinist themes. Literature from Geneva emphasized moral struggle, discipline, and divine judgment. Today, films and books exploring existential anxiety, moral responsibility, and achievement obsession echo these same patterns. The concept challenges modern assumptions about free will. If your destiny is predetermined, why stress about success or failure? Calvin answered through behavior. Outward discipline and moral life were necessary, even if they could not alter salvation. Predestination shaped education systems. Schools emphasized rigorous learning, obedience, and moral instruction. The goal was to cultivate habits that outwardly reflected the elect. A principle that resonates in modern emphasis on credentials, grades, and measurable achievement. Even financial habits carry echoes. Calvinists practiced frugality and avoided ostentation to demonstrate virtue. Today, budgeting, saving, and ethical consumer choices often carry a similar moral undertone, linking personal discipline with perceived worthiness. Understanding predestination gives insight into cultural psychology. The modern obsession with proof, through work, achievement, or social status is not entirely new. Calvin's theology planted seeds of behavioral patterns that continue to influence individuals and societies. In comparing Calvin to Weber, the distinction is clear. Calvin motivated behavior through spiritual anxiety, while Weber analyzed the long-term economic and social effects. One created the inner tension, the other explained its global consequences. Ultimately, Calvin's predestination teaches a timeless lesson. Striving without certainty creates anxiety. But discipline and moral focus shape culture and personal behavior. Recognizing these patterns today helps us understand modern restlessness, work obsession, and the search for validation. If you found this dive into John Calvin and predestination interesting, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. You'll get more videos uncovering how history, philosophy, and theology shape the world we live in today, and how these ideas still affect our daily lives.